So kind of annoyed at React. This one's by Cassidy Williams. All right. So it says, I'm kind of annoyed at the state of React lately. I still use it regularly and am somewhat friendly with folks that work on it still. And it's the first library I reach for, but it's just gotten too confusing and frustrating. This has been my complaint about React since it came out. Not that it's gotten, but it kind of started out that way. And my feelings on it changed over time quite a bit. So like at first I didn't like it because it had a build step. That was the first thing I didn't like. That was back in like the Angular 1 days. And I wasn't a fan of the build step. Then I got over that as I started playing with new frameworks. But then JSX just seemed weird. There's some weirdness with like some property names, if I remember right. Like things aren't named exactly the way they're named in HTML, and that's because of the way JavaScript works. I think it's the dash, if I remember right. To where you can't have a dash in an HTML attribute name, but that actually gets used quite a few places, like the data attribute. Not that you need that a lot when you're using something like React. But then I also didn't like the whole ejection from Create React App. Create React App ejection, and then you had to manage your own Webpack config, and that was a nightmare. I did not like it from the get-go. So context for reading this article. My backgrounds are, like I said, Angular 1, and then we went from there. The team I worked on moved to Vue 2 and then Vue 3. So that's my progression. And before that, played with jQuery quite a bit. So that's my progression. And now I've played with Svelte, and obviously, like you saw earlier in stream, I really like HTMX and where that's going. So that's kind of my background. So we'll see. But anyway, not to boast, but I really know React. I've used it for almost a decade. I've seen it morph and grow and use the frameworks that have popped up to work with it. I've written dozens of articles and tutorials for it. I was in the React 18 working group and other related groups before that, and before the pandemic, I taught React full time. So trust me when I say React's gotten really hard to understand. It has. And while React server components are probably the right direction for the industry as a whole to move, for web development as a whole to go, I'm not convinced that React's implementation is good. I'm not on board. I don't like the whole, there's some crazy stuff that goes across the network. It's not just HTML that gets sent. It's deserialized into JSON, and then you're serializing that back to HTML or something crazy like that. It really sounds insane, and you can't do it with any backend. And that's just server components. What are hooks? As a Vue developer, what even are hooks? Why do you need hooks? What are they? So it really does get weird. The more it kind of feels like things have been bolted onto it, honestly. It's getting that old code feeling. I know that doesn't always mean it's a bad. It doesn't always mean that a product is bad, that things are bolted on. But when they're bolted on and then it doesn't feel like the whole thing as a whole was really thought through properly. And part of that's because of JavaScript and just the side effects of being JavaScript. But it just feels kludgy to use React. The every time I've tried it, it's felt kludgy. My original blog was a React, a Gatsby site. And that just felt like so much boilerplate and so overcomplicated. I was making GraphQL requests to get things on my disk. It's like the markdown files on my disk shouldn't need a GraphQL request. So, I mean, and that's Gatsby, not necessarily React, but the whole ecosystem kind of feels that way. So we'll see. We'll see where that goes or what happens. But I predict that a lot of people will keep using React, but a lot of people will also start to look at other solutions. And HTMX is a pretty good one. It's the one I like right now. So I feel like the lack of understanding comes from not communicating properly with the community, both educational content and also transparency about what, how, etc. things are being built, and it frustrates me. It's frustrating to see that there hasn't been a release since June 2022. It's frustrating that the core team all spouted use a framework with React 18, and then most of the vocal ones left their jobs to join a company that owns a large React framework, the Triangle company, Vercel. And that framework, read next, seems to use canary releases rather than the one that's stable and out in the world. And it seems like a cool kid monopoly. Yeah, this is really weird to me that Next releases the canary release of React as stable on Next. Like, that's just weird. That's just really weird. And then makes every other, like, you think of like Astro. Astro can't use the canary build and call it stable. Like, if you're one of the other framework vendors or framework meta frameworks, you can't really use React in your meta framework at the same version that Vercel can with Next.js. And that's monopolistic behavior. So it really is kind of weird. And also it's like, when I think I blinked and then Vercel now basically has most of the React team. Like, it's really crazy. Like, didn't that used to be Facebook? So some odd stuff going on. But I mean, it's working out for Vercel so far. So we'll see what happens, I guess. But it's frustrating that they took so long to write new documentation, and the folks writing them weren't properly supported. That if you look up React documentation, the new docs aren't even the first result. It's frustrating that there's 2 Reacts now. Not that there shouldn't be, but that it's not clear and easily understandable mental model for most people. Having a standard is always easier to reason about. It doesn't necessarily drive innovation, but if you're looking for stability and ease of learning, having a single one is the better option. So you kind of need to choose. And it seems like React has kind of chosen their multiple paths. Like, they're unopinionated, so they're gonna be confusing. It's frustrating that diversity efforts visibly took a backseat with React leadership, and there's just not as many voices from a variety of different people anymore. It's everybody from Vercel. That's who's driving the boat. So, bleh. Anyway, I really didn't mean for this to be a negative Nancy post. I've harped on the React team's communication before, and I do think they've gotten a bit better. And again, I still reach for React when I want to build something somewhat complex. I just wish I were happier about it when I do. I'm optimistic for the future, kind of. I fit in the kind of category. I think we need to rethink things. I think from the ground up, things need to be rethought. I think there's better ways of doing all this. I don't think that the current React paradigm is good anymore. And that's weird. Like, I used to, in school, I thought the whole front-end framework thing was the future. I thought the front-end framework craze was how you should build websites from now on. And my professor at the time, he said something that I didn't remember and I hadn't seen in a very long time until I saw some tweets by HTMX. But the Helios, the HTML as the engine of application state. He advocated for that over doing things like React. And at the time, we were just like, that's an antiquated idea. Like, the web isn't moving that way. That's not going to happen. But now, when someone built HTMX, which is a very simple, it's not even an abstraction. It's just extending the standard to what it should have been in the first place, in my opinion. Now you end up with something that's very basic, very simple, and still works. So I think that's the future. I think HTMX gets built into the browser at some point because it's so close to HTML anyway. And from there on, we don't necessarily need a whole front-end framework to build an app. And maybe you need it for some really interactive portions of your site. But then you're reaching for something like Svelte, which compiles to HTML, CSS, and JavaScript rather than having a virtual DOM. I think that's the future. I think that's where things should be headed. So tell me what you think. Throw a comment in the comment section below. Like and subscribe to get more content like this thrown at you in the future. Also, if you want to hang around for some of these React videos being recorded, that happens at stream starts at 7 p.m. on Mondays. So come join us if you'd like. All right. Bye, y'all.